Hello friends, how are you guys doing today? I'm David Vos. This is October the 18th, 2013. It's Friday. I want to continue on with a little bit about the Bible. Some of the things I was talking about, raw food. And today I don't have any notes or anything. I'm just going to talk from my heart. Forgive me if I stumble on my words. But I've learned a lot of things. Some of the things that I've been learning frighten me in a way. Um, they don't really frighten me. I don't know why we say things like that. I didn't mean it that way. But, you know, they're just big things. They're awesome things. And it's a little difficult because these are the kind of things that you don't hear anywhere, you know. And every time you try to tell somebody something that no one's ever told you before, you wonder if people are going to think you're crazy. Well, I've got to take that risk and you be the judge. I'm sure that some people may think so, but others will actually probably learn something. And you can all do the research on your own, and I'm going to do the best I can to make it plain what I'm trying to say. But I think there's a lot of things that we have misunderstood about the scriptures. You've heard that before, but this, I think after today, you might really think that even more. You know, I look at the Bible today like a book of covenants, which is really just one covenant. You know, it's the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. You know, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I'd kind of heard that when I was younger, but I didn't really know what all that meant. I like to put it this way: a covenant is like a relationship. It's an agreement that we have with God. God has with us. And it doesn't even have to be agreement. You know, that can be a forced covenant. Like, you know, this is the law and you're going to do it. But, you know, really the first covenant that God made with man, he didn't really say a whole lot. He just did it. And it wasn't a lot of, you know, there wasn't any rules and there was no laws. Because before man even existed, it says that God created the world. And it appears that the reason he did so is for man. We hadn't done anything. We didn't even exist before it even created man. And after he created everything, he made a thing called the garden. And now, if you look that word up, it's a hedged area. And you might remember from, you know, like the book of Job or other places where when you have a hedged in area, it's sort of protection. That's what it represents. A place of protection. So really when God made the garden, he made a place where man would be protected and taken care of. Because not only did it have a hedge, it had two things that were vital for life. One was food and one was shelter. And of course the other thing is protection that we talked about. But if you go into the New Testament, you'll find that it says that with food and clothing, or food and covering, let us be content therewith. We don't really need anything else in life. The only other thing we would need is love or companionship, which God provided in the garden as well. And that really is the covenant. God is the one who always provides, and we're the ones who receive. Mankind could never get any food if it weren't for nature providing for us. And even, you know, if you think, well, we can eat synthetic foods today, whatever, they're still all created and designed from the earth, which was created by God, even if they were healthy. So in the garden, we noticed that the first thing that God created for man to eat was fruit. And I've covered this in the last video about how Genesis 1:29 talks about eating the fruit of the trees and with the seed therein, and how that represents the offspring. Well, the seed doesn't, but the fruit that it mentions there, when it says it has seed, sometimes that word is translated offspring, children. So it doesn't really mean seed, it means offspring. And so the next line or verse says, and you may eat the plants or the herbs or vegetation that bears offspring. So I don't really believe we're supposed to eat the roots or the leaves, but the offspring of that plant. Now in nature, in scientific fact, what you'll find is that all the plants have a lot of nutrients in the roots, and then they begin to create this sprout, and the nutrients go to making that sprout. And then finally that root and everything starts to dry out and become hard, except for maybe a few veins to where it can suck up water. The roots are just really to get water and minerals out of the ground. The leaves are like little photosynthesis satellite receivers. They're receiving sunshine. And with nitrogen, it does this photosynthesis thing, and it creates energy right straight from water and minerals and the sun. It converts minerals and earth into a nutrient that humans can eat and animals. Now, the reason humans can eat roots at all is because before the fruit is formed, all the nutrients that's going to be into that fruit has got to come through the root. And then it's got to go into the bud, and then it finally forms the fruit. So the final result is the fruit, and that's what is best to eat. There are some roots that have a lot of nutrients in them, and people talk about what's got all these vitamin B's and vitamin A's and vitamin Z's, and sure, shoe leather has some vitamins in it, but if it can't be digested, then it's not going to be good for you. Because it's got to be absorbed into the system. And if it has poisons, it won't be good for you. What most people don't tell you, I mean, you very rarely hear this, but most all roots and leaves, spinach has a lot of nitrogen. So spinach may be good for you, in the old story with Popeye, because maybe it has quite a few, vitamins in one area or another. That's fine. But there are a lot of things that aren't good for you about roots and leaves. And the biggest thing that I can point out is the nitrogen. In fact, if a baby, like 6 months and younger, is to eat roots, like if you just take roots and grind up and feed that baby or spinach, the baby can die from nitrogen, from too much nitrogen. So when you go to the store and you buy Gerber vegetables, they take that nitrogen out of the baby food before you feed it to the baby. So roots can be good for you at times, and there's not, some roots don't have that much nitrogen. You can eat a little of it. Now, we're not always supposed to eat the same thing. We eat different things in the winter that we might eat in the summer, and it might be that it's okay to eat a few roots at certain times because maybe during the winter, like in the summer, we're eating a lot of berries, and that is going to cleanse us from some of that nitrogen. So it isn't a deadly thing to eat a root, but it isn't a healthy thing, and you shouldn't eat them all the time. But primarily, if you look at that scripture, God is saying, eat the fruit or the offspring of the plant. That's where science brings all of its ingenuity from God's design, and with photosynthesis creates this perfect form of energy. So what people are supposed to eat is sugar. All real food, like any kind of fruit, berry, nut, well, not so much nuts, and I want to tell you about the nuts in a minute, but all food, like milk is a food for babies. Eggs are a food, but actually, I'm going to tell you in a minute how there are two different kinds of food that are very important, both of them. But so I shouldn't say all foods, but fruits, berries, and milk, which is a food, is about 90% sugar. Milk is made of lactose, which is sugar. Fruit is with mostly fructose, and some other kinds of fruit and stuff have glucose. But the cose and the toast at the end is the sugar. And it's about 90% of all food. The other 10% is mostly protein. There's about 8% protein in all fruits, milk, cheese, berries. And so that's what a food is supposed to be. Sugar and 8% protein, and the rest of it, which is 2%, is going to be your minerals and vitamins and other things, and fiber. So there's another kind of food, and this is important because, you know, in the summertime, mostly what's going to be growing is berries and fruit. And so it's going to be sugar. And you're out running and doing all kinds of things and exercising, so you're eating a lot of sugar. You're burning it right away. And what you don't burn, the body stores it in fat. Bears will get all fat during the summer eating berries and stuff. And they eat a lot of fish, and they'll fatten up on that. And then as it gets winter, they will eat, their body will live on the reserves that they have built up in their fat. Humans are similar to that. I don't know if we're supposed to get fat and then live off of that during the winter, but we do live off fat during the winter. And how do I mean that? Well, because the berries and things like that are mostly sugar, not very much fat at all. But in the wintertime, what are we going to eat? There's no berries. Well, if you go to any place in the world, you know, north of the 45th parallel and up, even below that, and the southern hemisphere as well, it's all pine trees. Different various kinds of evergreens. And they have cones which is full of pine nuts and different kind of nuts. Certain areas of the earth in temperate climates is oaks. It's mostly oak trees, and they have acorns. And places like Oklahoma and Arkansas and, you know, vast areas all over the world have mostly walnuts. Different kinds of walnuts and filberts and other kinds of nuts. So most of the earth is covered in some sort of a nut, which isn't mostly sugar, but it's mostly fats. And as anyone might have noticed, berries are only ripe for a month or two. We're only going to be eating the berries for a couple, 3 months, you know. Yeah, you could dry them out and you can eat them later, but for the most part, when you eat fresh fruit, they're not going to be around a lot. Not in certain climates. But in almost every climate, wherever you are, there is a type of nut. And nuts have oils, fatty acids. The other thing you can eat is fish, if you were to eat a fish diet. And fish also has a lot of those fatty acids, which today we're finding out are essential to our health. So a lot of people start to find out about something, and then they start telling you this is what you need to eat, and they don't know exactly what they're talking about. The truth is that we humans may not ever know all the wonderful things about diet. It's too complicated to try and figure it all out. What we need to do is look at nature. Nature will tell us what to eat. And then leave it to the scientists and the doctors to find out later why that was actually good for you. But sure enough, we should get most of our, because fats are sugars that have been stored. That's what they are. The fish eats sugar and stores it in fat. The nuts there's a lot of sugar in trees, like they have a syrup, a lot of sap. It comes up. It's the lifeblood of the tree. It sucks it from the ground and turns it into a sap, which is sugar. Just pure sugar. Where's that sugar go? Well, it's feeding the tree. And it's going right into that fruit. And in the case of nuts, it's creating a fat. And that oily fat, along with the proteins and things that are in that nut, is how God, I would say 60% of our diet should be nuts. We've been wrong. And one of the reasons why people aren't living very long is because they're trying to live on just sugar. Even though it's fruit, it isn't. We were never intended to eat just fruit, because fruit only grows annually for a month or two. Now, in the desert regions, you'll have areas of mesquite. And it's just from Arizona all the way, through Texas, which is 3 or 4 different states up into Oklahoma and Kansas, is nothing but mesquite. And most people will look at that and say, well, that's just, you can't eat that. Actually, there's more protein per acre of mesquite than an irrigated field of corn per acre. If you were to irrigate that field of corn and do all that you could and enrich it and put the vitamin in and harvest it, you'd get less protein, less nutrition, less food per square acre than the mesquite that grows all by itself without irrigation, all by itself. It throws its seeds and it plants itself and grows itself and has no irrigation. But mesquite, and if you're not familiar with them, they're actually the same thing that grows in Israel, and they call it acacia. It grows all over the Middle East. It's really the same kind of tree, and they have big thorns on them, which is actually to protect that food source, which is bean pods that dangle and hang off of long bean pods. It's a rich source of protein and fats and oils and sugars. And inside, in between the beans, there's a sugary and a oily sugar, a fat and a sugar. So I don't know the exact details of what the bean pods are made out of or whatever, but I know they're edible and they have a high, rich source of nutrition. Also in the desert, which is mostly cactus, every form of cactus known to man is edible. And another little tidbit is that all herbal flowers are edible. The buds, which is the fruit, and the flowers, which later produce a little kind of a seed or a fruit, all of those are edible. You will never find a vegetation or herb that has flowers that's not edible. And I'm not talking about, of course, hemlock is not edible, but that's not, there's a word that I'm thinking of, and I can't think of it right at the moment. Well, don't quote me on that. Don't go around eating flowers until I get back to you, and I'll let you know what that word was. But it's not just all herbs altogether. It's a certain kind of flowering herb that is edible. So I'll get back to you on that. But a lot of flowers are edible. And I don't even think hemlock has a flower. But people confuse hemlock with carrots, wild carrots, parsnip, and different types of carrots that grow wild. And you have to be careful because hemlock can be poisoned. But there's another interesting thing. A lot of people have said, and we've trusted this. People have said these things for years, and we just believe it. They say, well, all these things out in the wild are poison. I don't think anything's poison. God created all of it. Now, there's different kinds of poison, like even the hemlock. You don't just eat a little piece of hemlock and die. You've got to eat a whole big bush of it. Or what people started dying because they were picking it by the bunches, thinking it was parsnip or carrots or there's another plant called something like lace or something lace. Anyway, they thought it was that, and they cut up a bunch of it, eat a whole big salad of it, and then they died. So you're not going to die just from eating a little bit of it. But I wouldn't eat hemlock. But what I'm trying to get at is that, let's say that I had never done heroin, and I haven't. But if I were to go out and take a bunch of heroin right now, it would kill me because I've never done heroin. But somebody who's been on heroin all their life can do, I don't know how many ounces or however they measure it, enough that would kill 10 people. They could take it and be fine because they get used to it. Our bodies get used to everything. And we're so used to eating garbage, sugar. If you'd never eaten sugar, white processed sugar, and then you went out and ate several cookies, you'd probably kill you. And that's a fact because I don't eat sugar, and it's true because my body's not used to eating sugar. I can't just go out and eat a bunch of cake. If I ate a big piece of cake about that big, a big piece of cake, I would get sick. One time I drank a bunch of chocolate milk thinking it was, it's going to be like a cup of coffee, and forgot that there was all that sugar in it, and it just about killed me. So, when people who live off of starches and candies and nothing but meat, all of a sudden goes out and gets some bush out in the field and eat it, and it makes them sick, they say it's poison. Well, a lot of times it's simply because we're not used to it. But there are various kinds of plants, and some of them are not made to be eaten in large quantities. Some of them are made to be eaten for diuretic purposes, for constipation, for herbal remedies. If you know, in every area of the world, there is a type of drug. If you go some places, it's poppies, and that's heroin. In certain areas of the desert, it's peyote, and it's all over the place. And up in Idaho, in Canada, it's kinnikinnick. There's always an herb for pain and for a drug to take away pain and to cause a person to feel better when they're sick. Readily available wherever you are in the world, there is that. God has provided. And so that's why in the north you've got pine nuts. In the west coast and the east coast you've got oak trees around Texas, and those are acorns. And in certain areas you've got walnuts going everywhere. In the deserts you've got mesquite, which is the beans. But everywhere has a nutritious diet. If you were to go to the area that you live and take the food that grows naturally and eat that, you would have a perfect diet. Looking at the area that those people, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, in our area that we know about, because I don't know that much about China and Brazil and other places of the world, but I'm sure it's very similar to ours. And I don't know anything about the tropics, but all the places that I'm familiar with has an abundant sugary, fruity thing like berries and things like that in the late summer that you could harvest and eat all you want and get fat on. Sugar produces fat. You store it in your body as fat. And then in the winter you don't have all of that. You're going to be living on fish or nuts, because you can pick the nuts and they'll last all winter. And nuts are mostly oils. Your body can convert the fatty acids into oils. And we're finding out now that eggs and chickens, of course, you can take chickens with you wherever you go. Now, another interesting thing is that Jesus mentioned 3 things that were good food. One of them was eggs. And a lot of people don't realize Jesus mentioned eggs. And he said it was a good food, and it was a great gift from God. Scientifically, eggs have the highest, best, most balanced protein of any food in the world. A chicken, when it's nothing but a little cellular dot, within just a couple of few weeks grows into a full chicken with lungs and a heart and veins and feathers, feet and claws, and the whole chicken within, I think, a couple of 2-3 weeks. And the only thing they live on is that yolk that's in the egg. And in that egg is a perfect food. And it can make a person grow perfectly, and you can live off of that, except for it doesn't have fiber. But when babies are living, they live off something like milk or, so eggs is like the milk of the chicken for their baby. And Jesus Christ says that if you ask God for an egg, he wouldn't give you a scorpion. Why? Because scorpions are bad. They sting you. But eggs are good. And he says, so our Father in heaven gives us good and perfect gifts. And truly the egg is a perfect gift. So that's another thing you can eat in the wintertime. But again, it's a lot of cholesterol. They used to say that cholesterol was bad for you. And now we find out that cholesterol, which is, fatty acids, are absolutely imperative. Most of your brain is made up of fatty acids. And, your tissues and all of your heart and things that are so necessary. Your organs and things have to have that to survive. And it is not, you talk about essential vitamins and nutrients. Fatty acids are more essential on a daily basis, far more essential than any vitamin or any other nutrient. And so, fruitarians must be careful that they don't start thinking that you can live on just bananas, apples, and melons. Because even though it is beautifully good for you to eat that, it is a food from God, and it's definitely God made it. When you look at nature, you realize that the fruit is only there for a couple of months. Our primary diet is nuts, perhaps fish. If you choose not to eat fish, you can eat nuts, beans, and other things that provide us with this high fatty acid diet, which is so important because the body can take fat and transform it into energy. And it builds, it's not just that, we actually have to have the fatty acids to build brain matter and other parts of our body. So the other thing is that people, and you find it in milk, and you find it in eggs, and there's a lot of oil and natural fats in eggs. Butter is some of the things that a lot of vegans are missing comes from butter and eggs, vitamin B12, and choline, and I think it's Vanderin or something. It's I'm trying to think of the word right now. It's slipping my mind. There's a couple. Selenium is very important. It causes so many diseases. A lot of the heart disease and bone, diseases and problems with our body is caused from a deficiency in selenium and vandamin and other. I think it's choline. I can't remember. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Maybe on the next video I'll let you know. But it's found in eggs abundantly, in milk, and it's also found in meat, which is why people who eat meat don't have these deficiencies. But those of us who don't eat meat for other reasons, because meat isn't good for you, and for a lot of other reasons. But it does happen to have a few things that we need, like vitamin B12 and selenium. But you can get those things out of eggs and milk, and vegans don't eat that. So I suggest if you're a vegan that you go back and read the Bible. A lot of vegans are believers in the scripture. And God talks about a land of milk and honey. Remember, honey is from a product from the bee, the fruit of the bee, and milk is the fruit of the cow, and eggs is the fruit of the chicken. So Jesus recommended eating eggs, and the Bible recommends eating milk. So remember, we've got to have our fatty acids, which you can't just get from all the fruit. It's detrimental that we have those fatty acids. Well, that's all I really have to say today, and I'm going to leave it there, and I'll get back to you guys in a few days. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. It's David Vos.